Everyone knows Chinese workers built the Transcontinental Railroad. Nobody knows 10,000 plus Mexican workers built it too. They were erased from history. 1863, the United States starts building the Transcontinental Railroad, the project that would connect the East Coast to the West Coast, the most important infrastructure project in American history. History books tell you, Chinese immigrants built the railroad through the Sierra Nevada mountains. Irish immigrants built it from the east. That's the story. Chinese and Irish, except it's incomplete. 10,000 plus Mexican workers built massive sections of the railroad. They laid track through California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. They worked the same brutal conditions, the same dangerous jobs. But when you Google who built the Transcontinental Railroad, you see Chinese workers, Irish workers, no mention of Mexicans. Here's what actually happened. Mexican workers were already in the Southwest. The land had been Mexico until 1848, just 15 years before the railroad started. Mexicans knew the terrain, knew how to survive the desert heat. They were recruited heavily for the railroad. Southern Pacific Railroad hired thousands of Mexican workers to build through. California's Central Valley, Nevada's deserts, Arizona's mountains, New Mexico's plateaus, Texas's plains, same backbreaking labor as everyone else, laying track in 110-degree heat, blasting through mountains with dynamite. Dozens died from heat stroke, explosions, and accidents. Mexican workers worked alongside Chinese workers in California. They faced the same discrimination, the same impossible quotas. But there's a key difference. Chinese workers got recognized. Mexican workers got erased. Why? Because when the railroad was completed in 1869, the United States wanted to tell a specific story. We brought Chinese immigrants here to build this. We gave Irish immigrants jobs. The narrative was, America brought workers to build the railroad. But Mexicans weren't brought. They were already here, because it was their land 20 years earlier. Acknowledging Mexican railroad workers meant acknowledging the U.S. took Mexican territory in 1848, then used Mexican labor to build infrastructure on stolen land. That's not the story America wanted to tell, so they just didn't mention the Mexicans. The famous Golden Spike photo from 1869, the completion ceremony at Promontory Summit, Utah. You've seen it. 2 trains meeting. Men in suits shaking hands. No Chinese workers in the photo, no Mexican workers, no Irish workers. Just executives and dignitaries. The workers who actually built it? Not invited. But here's what happened next. In the 1900s, historians started recognizing Chinese contributions. The Chinese built the railroad through impossible conditions. True, and important to acknowledge. In the 1990s, 2000s, monuments were erected honoring Chinese railroad workers. Museums created exhibits. Textbooks added, Chinese immigrants built the Transcontinental Railroad. Progress, overdue, necessary, but still incomplete, because Mexican workers built it too, and they're still not in the textbooks. Today, if you visit railroad museums, you'll see sections on Chinese workers, sections on Irish workers, photos, artifacts, stories, almost nothing on Mexican workers. The Chinese-American community fought for recognition and won it. The Mexican-American community, still fighting. Here's the evidence Mexican workers were there. Railroad company payroll records listing Spanish surnames, photographs of Mexican workers on construction sites, oral histories from descendants, census records showing Mexican railroad workers in California, Nevada, Arizona. The proof exists. It's just been ignored. Why does this matter? Because erasure isn't passive. It's active. Someone decided which workers to photograph. Someone decided which workers to mention in reports. Someone decided which workers to honor in history books. And at every step, they chose to exclude Mexicans. Not because Mexicans didn't contribute, but because acknowledging them complicated the narrative. If Mexican workers built the railroad on land that was Mexico 20 years prior, then the railroad isn't just a story of American innovation. It's a story of American expansion built on taken land with the labor of the people you took it from. That's uncomfortable, so it's easier to just not mention them. Today, the Transcontinental Railroad is celebrated as an American triumph. We connected a nation, east to west, built by Chinese and Irish immigrants and 10,000-plus invisible Mexican workers, who were already living on that land before it was called America. Chinese workers recognized, finally, after decades of advocacy. Irish workers recognized. Mexican workers still erased. Not because they did less work, not because they were less important, because recognizing them means recognizing whose land the railroad was built on. Share this if you learned about the Transcontinental Railroad in school and nobody mentioned Mexican workers, because 10,000-plus Mexican workers laid track, blasted mountains, and died building it. And American history books wrote them out completely. Chinese workers deserve recognition. Irish workers deserve recognition. Mexican workers deserve recognition too. But 155 years later, they're still waiting. Not because the evidence doesn't exist, because America doesn't want to admit the railroad was built on stolen land by the people it was stolen from. Share this if you learned about the Transcontinental Railroad in school and nobody mentioned Mexican workers,